This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Serious class today. A really serious class. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Okay, here we go. You dial set correctly to USAPrepares.com, and we're broadcasting live, Studio A, high top of the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Link to all of your instructors on the website, USAPrepares.com. Converging threats are everywhere, and they're confronted daily by your instructors. Dave's producing the broadcast at the world headquarters of Genesis Communications Network. Today's class is a very difficult subject. It's about suicide. And you know that suicide is on the upswing. Joel Johnson's with us. You know him as the real MacGyver. He's been to all of our expos. He's been to meetups. He's been on the air with me in the morning program and the afternoon programming. You know him as the invisible invention guy. You know him as the guy who figures out what you can use of what you have right now to get out of the jam you're in. That's the real MacGyver. Well, lately, Joel Johnson and I have been talking about some serious topics. The day of the Colorado movie massacre, Joel Johnson jumped on the landline and we did a broadcast about that, and I said, I believe it's an inside job. The day of the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre, he hopped on the landline, and we talked about what was happening there. I believe that was an inside job. Boston Marathon massacre, we talked about that. I believe it was an inside job. And the poisoning of America with fluoride, I believe it's an inside job. Today, another very serious topic. People are killing themselves, literally, jumping in front of trains in New York City, overdosing. And I believe that some of this, too, is an inside job caused by prescription medications, anti-anxiety and antidepressant meds, legally prescribed by medical doctors, legally produced by the pharmacological industry. Joel Johnson, which you might not have known, he is a USAPrepares.com instructor, you know that. But USAPrepares.com instructors are very interesting individuals with diverse backgrounds. Now, that's how they get to be instructors with us. Joel was a small-town police chief, peace officer, worked as a paramedic, and he's the guy that when you pick up that telephone and you call a suicide prevention team, he's on the other end. Welcome, Joel Johnson.
Hey, good morning, Vinny. It's great to be here.
Well, Joel, it's a real serious topic. And, normally I don't quite sound like this. I have a little more bounce in my step than this. But let me share a story with you, Joel. I know a man who had a job, went to work every day. He was good at what he did. He had a white-collar job. and I'm talking in the 1980s. And but he was anxious, and he was given some anti-anxiety medicine. He had one of those desk-type jobs, and his doctor prescribed it because his wife had died and left him with two small children, less than 10 years of age each, a boy and a girl. And he took his meds as he was directed, and went to a church group, Parents Without Partners. So it's a Catholic organization, Parents Without Partners. And he met this other woman, and she had a daughter. And her daughter was older. And they decided that the woman who had the older daughter, her husband died of a heart attack. So his wife died, her husband died, and they were without partners, and they were trying to raise their families. They got married. And one day the father of the two small children drove up to the top of a bridge, pulled over to the side of the bridge. I mean a very tall bridge. I mean a really, really tall bridge, like a couple 100 feet up in the air. Put his emergency flashers on, put his wallet on the dashboard, walked out of the car, and jumped off the bridge. And lived. And after he got out of the hospital, everybody's like, well, what the heck did he do that for? I visited him in the hospital. I know all the parties concerned. And he got patched up, and, months later he's back at work, and he's at home and, doing the regular routine. He and his wife are having breakfast just before they go to work, separate jobs. And he stays behind, and she drives off and then says, something's not right. Turns around, comes home, looks for him. The car's in the driveway. Can't find him. She goes down the basement, and there he is, swinging by a rope. He hung himself. That time he was successful. So people do commit suicide. I've seen it. I saw a man jump off a bridge. I was on a holiday, I believe it was Easter, many, many years ago. And I was driving on a major highway, and there was an overpass. And this man jumped off the bridge right in front of my vehicle. Landed face down on the highway. And he was alive. And I stopped traffic and took control of the situation and got people to call for emergency rescue and so forth. And so I've seen, that's two I know of firsthand. Joel, almost every family has been involved somehow, impacted some way by a suicide or an attempted suicide.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on?
Well, it certainly is an epidemic, Vinny. There's a large dark figure of crime there. What we mean by that's a phrase used for the unreported cases or the cases that aren't correctly diagnosed as being suicide. For example, suicide by cop is usually rendered as a homicide. Some accidents are probably suicides. It's not always a very clean answer on whether or not it is, so we don't know what the exact numbers are. We do know that it has reached epidemic proportions, and it keeps getting higher and higher. Our contention at the National Crisis Intervention Training Institute is that one life, one precious life, is more valuable than the national debt. And so, to talk about the epidemic to us is kind of a secondary topic. We want to focus on what people can do to help folks one-on-one, one person at a time. I can give you figures, out by CDC and all of that stuff, but really that's not the most important thing here. The most important thing is how to recognize what's going on and what to do about it. It's very interesting when you and I were talking the other day about medication and how some medications tends sometimes to increase the likelihood of suicide if as an adverse reaction. Well, that's a complicated issue as well. In one sense, it might be like saying, if you take insulin, you're much more likely to die of diabetes, okay, than if you don't. When in fact, people that don't take insulin very often aren't diabetic. You see what I mean? It's not always the cause. Sometimes it's correlation between the two. But there are some meds that sometimes, when taken, can increase suicidal thoughts or risk of suicide. I think personally it's because sometimes it masks the people's ability to feel and process through feelings. And that's an extremely important thing to do.
Well, what I'm saying is Dr. Norman Shealy has been on the air with me many times, and we've been talking about anti-anxiety drugs and antidepressants. And if you take antidepressants, you will become depressed. And there is a correlation between these drugs, these medications, and
there's definitely a correlation. Yeah, definitely a correlation. But what I'm saying is proving cause sometimes is a more complicated thing than proving a correlation. And I'm not saying it's not the case. I'm just saying that certain meds, if they do increase a person's risk of suicide, I believe it's because they're pharmacologically relying on something to mask feelings of depression rather than processing through those feelings and by dealing with what's causing it. You have to go to the core of the problem.
I think I get it. I think what you're saying is something kind of like in my personality. If something bothers me, like if I'm starting a broadcast and I hear the top of the hour news and I know it's an absolute bold-faced lie, I go, "What? I can't believe it! Who are you?" I'll just lose my temper right there, and it's over. Okay, it's not bottled up for a minute, a week, a month, a year, and it doesn't get to the point where it's really dangerous. I just let it out right then and there. So I guess that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's reckless and irresponsible to just make a blanket statement that people should not take antidepressants.
You're going to have a head-on collision with Dr. Norman Shealy. Joel Johnson, the real MacGyver, and he's the guy that you call when you pick up that suicide prevention hotline, and he's with the National Crisis Intervention Training Institute. We'll be right back. Joel Johnson's with us, and he's with the National Crisis Intervention Training Institute, nciti.org. And if you'd like to check out the website, there are a whole bunch of publications that he offers for free. All you have to do is just download them. Joel, so we're talking about medications, and both of us, including Dr. Shealy, believe that they do play a role for sure. Why do people commit suicide?
Well, for every person that commits suicide, at the time that it's occurring for what they very possibly believe to be a hopeless and or irrational reason. Basically, the reason they commit suicide is because they come to a point where they have made a decision that they want to die. Now, that sounds overly simplistic, but what I mean by that is there's a remarkable difference between wanting to die and being tired of living with the pain. If you're tired of living with the pain, suicide may be an option that you're considering. If you want to die, very often suicide is the only answer that you believe is available to you. And that's usually not the case. All right, but they die for what they believe is real. The reason they're killing themselves is because they're hurting so badly that they feel that there's nothing they can do except go ahead and relieve the pain in an ultimate way. Suicide is a permanent answer very often to a temporary problem, but sometimes suicide is something that people do because the pain is not going to get better. An example of that would be medically assisted suicide in terminal cases where the pain is so excruciating that the individual just can't live with the pain anymore. So there are millions of reasons why they do it. We believe that the core of that question, though, lies in answering that question and in resolving the problem, relies upon our ability to help people to find options, rely upon options, and to successfully use options that they didn't believe were available at the time. But suicidal people usually have some sort of tunnel vision going on where all they can see is the problem. And they see no...
I absolutely believe that.
Yeah.
Joel, I absolutely believe that. I believe that. I believe that that's all they can see. That's all they're thinking about. That's all, they're totally consumed by it. Joel, I'm looking at some numbers. Suicide takes the lives of nearly 30,000 Americans every year. That's huge.
I think the numbers are much bigger than that, Vinny. Here, let me explain why I'm saying that. And I'm aware of that particular statistic, and there are a number of different studies out there. They all give slightly different numbers, some of them bigger. One of the functions of the National Crisis Intervention Training Institute is what we call our psychological autopsy team, where we basically use a multidisciplinary approach to render a finding of whether or not a person died as a result of suicide when the answer is questionable on whether or not that happened. Now, I can give you one particular set of physical findings, both in evidence that's lying around and behavioral stuff that might cause you to believe that something is an accidental death, is an act of martyrdom, is a random suicide or a suicide because of depression, or is a homicide. Until we look at everything that was going on, we don't always know. So my point is that I'm sure the numbers are at least that, but I believe they're very possibly higher. Let me give you a quick example. One of the cases that we've looked at in psychological autopsy involves a young man who, when his family was away from the house, went into his bedroom, took his parents' firearm after typing out a note on the computer, laid down on the bed, took his family's firearm, and shot himself. Now, the law enforcement agency in that jurisdiction ruled it as a suicide. It was much, much more complicated than that. And, if someone threw himself on a grenade in combat to save his colleagues, we would not render that as a suicide. We would render that as an act of heroism where the person sacrificed his life.
Joel, hold on. Joel, hold on to that thought. We'll come back on the other side of the break and we'll talk more about jumping on a grenade. Class, Joel Johnson's with us for 2 hours today. And if you would like to contact us and ask Joel Johnson a question, you certainly may. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. We're going to talk about the signs of someone who might be considering suicide a little later in the broadcast. But if you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933. It's toll free. We'll pay for the call. Joel, we're talking about jumping on a grenade, and I know a man, Charles van Veek, from South Africa, and he was telling me that he was involved in a church where some girls came in and they threw in a grenade or a couple grenades, and a 17-year-old boy jumped on one to prevent the entire congregation from being wounded and possibly killed by these grenades. And he ate a grenade. And so it does happen. And I would say, yes, that person was a hero. But, he did take his own life to prevent the loss of lives of others. So let's talk about that. So we have the situation where this young person has got his parents' handgun, and what did he do?
Well, what he did was he shot himself in the head and killed himself. But we believe it was an act of heroism, not an overt act of suicide. And I'll tell you why. We believe this is what happened. We believe that the young man, for reasons that happened, and please, understand I'm not going to be giving a whole lot of specifics in the case because listeners that know the family I don't want them to put two and two together and figure out who it is that we're talking about. But there were reasons why this young man believed that his family would be at risk of being harmed if he wasn't taken out of the equation. Okay, and we believe that that's why he did that, in order to spare his family. He basically sacrificed his life to keep his family from being hurt. Okay, and so while that was ruled as a suicide, we believe that was overly simplistic, number one. Number two, in helping the family to understand that's very likely what happened, it allows them to see the death in a different light, and to not be damned by the questions that very often happen. Why did he do this and not tell us he was hurting, et cetera, et cetera? Every indication showed that this young man was not premeditatedly suicidal a few days before it occurred, that what he did was a very rational act, and that he believed it was the only way to spare his family. And so,
isn't that the way... And Joel, isn't that the way it always is with suicide? It's the only way out in the person's mind? There's no other alternative?
Well, yeah, but remember, Benny, usually we're talking about, with a case of overt suicide, we're talking about someone just wanting to end the pain. Okay, so my point being that in this particular instance, it was a sacrificial act and one that is easier for the family to embrace, because they can see their son the hero, and he is.
I'm with.
And should be looked at that way.
I'm with you there, Joel. No, I fully understand that. But what I'm saying is, there aren't, when a person gets to this point, there can't be many other options. It's like down to no options but this in that person's mind, right?
Yeah, there may be other options, but it's either an option they're not aware of, an option that is not coming to mind at the time, or an option that they don't trust.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So, yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. Our one of the most important things we can do in crisis intervention and dealing with that case is to help them get in touch with what some of their trustable resources are, and to build up their support system to the point where they can work their way through the situation. And that's almost always possible if we can get them to engage in conversation with us. We use a multidisciplinary approach to do that.
Joel, how do you do that? And here's why I'm saying this. We have a person who's at the end of his or her rope, and that person obviously is either unable to contact his or her family, or trust the family, or depend on the family. So now we're looking at someone that may be a friend, and if that's not an option, then it's a stranger, right?
Yeah, and very often we're the stranger. I directed the National Youth Crisis Hotline. I was affiliated with that program for the entire 9 years that it was in existence. And
that's what I mean. You're the stranger.
Yeah. And so what we had to do was very quickly get to a point where they could rely upon us. And that involves listening, giving them permission to feel. It involves building up trust. So there were several things that we would do strategically. The first thing I would do is let people know that we are available and that we're there. I'd let them know that we didn't expect them to trust us at that point. All we asked that they do is to watch us and give us an opportunity to earn the trust. We'd ask them that if they came to a point where they felt like that they could rely upon us, just give us the opportunity to be there. We gave them permission to feel, and we gave them permission to talk about whatever it is they want to talk about. And that's a big problem sometimes with suicide hotlines is that they want to get right to the chase and talk about the suicide, and they don't bother, or they don't feel that they have the luxury of building a relationship with the individual. A kid calling in, I got called into the director of the agency called me into her office one day, and she had some budgetary concerns, and basically what she said was we needed to not be on the phone more than, it was something like 6 to 10 minutes with any call that was not a suicide call. And to her credit, she listened to me when I explained to her that sometimes it's 30 minutes to an hour before we can really peel away the onion and find out whether or not it is a suicide call. They need talking first about their pimples, not telling us right off the bat that they have a gun in their hand. It involves building that relationship, breaking down the shame, helping them to feel less threatened, and giving them permission to feel and to express themselves. If a child called up and made used a lot of sexual innuendos, etc., and if one of my counselors, who was a very conservative Christian, would otherwise be tempted to discourage them from talking that way, I would train them on how to very carefully do that, because we didn't, it may be a sexually based shame issue that they're really calling about, that they're masking that with inappropriate remarks. And I said, if you cut them off and tell them not to use that kind of language with you, you may be cutting off their freedom to talk about their molestation or their rape or whatever. So we were very careful to train our counselors to respond to that appropriately, but to not cut the kids off ability to communicate and ability to feel.
Joel, I was approached by the owner of a radio network and about a year ago, and he said, do you realize that since you've been here, our phone bill has doubled?
Yeah.
And I said, huh. And I kind of turned and walked away. Yeah, I did it. It's all my fault. I doubled their phone bill. Yeah, I really did. I didn't say, I can't wait to start there because I'm going to double their phone bill. It's just a part of the process. I guess no one else does what I do at this radio station. And so how did you handle that? I mean, what did you say? Look, this is what we have to do. Is that where you went with it? Or
I explained to her that in that particular situation, we need to find the money to give these kids an opportunity to talk. That because it takes time for them to open up. And remember that some of these children were calling us on a regular basis. I've had cases where a kid called 5 times before he finally got down to the bottom line of explaining why he was really calling. So it's important to keep the door open, and I keep coming back to giving them permission to feel and permission to express themselves. One of the deadliest things you can say to a person that's suicidal is you shouldn't feel that way. Of course your parents love you. You shouldn't feel that way. If you use the terms you shouldn't feel that way, you're telling them your feelings are not valid. And you know what? They have the right to feel what they're feeling. They have the right to express it. And it's important to keep that line of communication going. Now, to her credit, she listened, and she said, you're absolutely right. What we need to do is, she said, I'll find the money somewhere to cover the phone bill. Just be, cautious. And we already were. But we weren't getting on there and just shoot the breeze with the kids and goofing off. In fact, we would, also, I heard one counselor one day tell the kid, I'll stay on with you as long as I can here. If I get a more important, she didn't say more important, but if I get a critical crisis intervention call, I'm going to have to let you go and take that call, if that's okay. Well, that opens up the door for that person to either manufacture a situation in order to keep that counselor's attention, or it opens them up to believe that they aren't as important as the kid calling in that wants to kill themselves. And so I would work with them on how to set up contracts to have specific time to talk with the child. In fact, gave them permission to stay after hours and to take a call from that kid on the regular line if they wanted to call back with this chat, and gave them that option. Or to call
Joel Johnson,
where we take their number.
Joel Johnson, we're talking about suicide, the National Crisis Intervention Training Institute.org, NCITI.org. Joel, when we come back, I've got to ask you, you're talking about children. Why are they calling? We'll be right back. Joel Johnson's with us, and we're talking about suicide, and the question that I had for Joel as we're going into the break was, he had mentioned children so many times, Joel, you had, and why are children calling?
Well, very often children call because they're in pain. They don't feel that there's anyone possibly available that they can talk to, that they can trust with whatever they're calling about. It may be that, there are folks I can talk to about just about anything, but this one thing I can't discuss with anyone. And that's very often shame-based or due to fear of rejection. There are many reasons why they call. Sometimes they call because they know someone that they suspect or know is thinking about suicide, someone that's tried it, someone that's already committed it. They're either calling to help or because they want help. There are certain questions, Benny, it's extremely dangerous to answer the questions with an answer when you're on a crisis intervention line. And one of them is, do you believe that suicide is the unpardonable sin, or do you believe that someone will go to hell for committing suicide? Now, I may have theological reasons to believe that suicide is not the unpardonable sin and that you won't automatically go to hell if you commit suicide. But if I tell a child, no, I don't believe that suicide is the unpardonable sin, I may just have inadvertently opened the door for them to go ahead and do it, because the one thing that was holding them back was the fear of going to hell. Or if their parent had already committed suicide, and I tell them, yes, I believe it's the unpardonable sin, they may now believe that their parent is in hell, and that may throw them into further rejection. So I always trained my people, and I meticulously practice answering that question with a question, not with an answer. Generally, what I would tell them is that I've been asked that many, many times. And in almost all cases where I was asked that question, someone was either thinking about it, had decided to do it, knew someone who had died as a result of suicide, or who had tried it. But no one calling up asking that question was calling up and asking it because they were doing a book report on suicide. And so I would ask them if any of those categories apply to them. Are they hurting? Have they been thinking about suicide as an option? And usually when you got to the bottom of it, the answer to that question was that there was some reason why they were personally concerned. Does that make sense?
Joel, as you say, yeah, absolutely. And something else makes sense, too. You and I talk a lot on the phone about all kinds of things, about events that are coming up, things that we're thinking about doing, broadcasts, all kinds of things, current events. We talk a lot on the phone, off the air. And your language, as I see it unfolding here, as you describe it, is very precise, and you're very careful how you say certain things. And now it all makes more sense why you're careful of the words that you choose, because they do have meaning and they can evoke responses. And obviously, Joel, I've alluded to this. I haven't really said it, but you have a lot of experiences. And you've seen a lot of things with your official capacities as chief of police and paramedic adventures. And you've seen a lot of really bad things. You've seen choices that people make that send them down the wrong path and ultimately could cause their own death and can ruin their lives. So, as I listen to you, I think about MacGyver and the way out of the box theory and how you look at things. It all makes sense to me now. It all makes sense because you have been there. You've been there. You've seen it. You've watched it. You've watched it unfold. You've been a participant in helping people who are in these situations. Joel Johnson, the National Crisis Intervention Training Institute, NCITI.org. We're going to be back in the next hour, and we're going to look for the signs. What do they look like when someone is considering suicide? We'll be back. Everyone all set? Hour number 2, USAPrepares.com. Joel Johnson's with us, and we're talking about a very, very, very serious topic, suicide. It seems to be occurring more and more often. It's very disturbing. It's happened to some people I know. It's affected their families. I saw a man jump off a bridge right in front of me many years ago over a holiday. Obviously, he was distraught. He thought he was going to have me run him over. I was just driving along the highway, and all of a sudden, from the overpass, a man jumped over the overpass and landed right in front of my vehicle. And of course, we stopped. I did not run him over. I had plenty of time to stop, and we summoned for help, and we got him to the hospital. But you read about these things. You read about what's happening in New York City. Distraught people losing their savings, losing their wherewithal due to the financial maneuvering that's going on in Wall Street. And some people have decided that they're just going to end it. They can't see any other option. Not that there's not another option, it's just that they can't, in their mind, see one. And that's what we're talking about. Joel Johnson's with us, and I'd like to know a couple things, Joel. One is, what are the signs? What are the signs that are exhibited by, let's say, a child? Let's start right there with a child who might be considering suicide. What does a parent need to pay attention to that would indicate, you know what, this is serious? Let's turn off the television. Let's put down the cell phone, and let's see what's going on, and let's prevent tragedy in our own homes. Joel, help us with that, please.
Well, there are a number of different danger signs to watch for, Vinny, and some of them are more definitive than others. Some of them, for example, eating disorders, things like that, may indicate other things going on that have nothing to do with suicidal ideation or suicidal thinking. But then there are some things that we look at that are just a little bit more definitive. Very often kids will hint around. They think they're communicating very clearly, or they're afraid to talk directly about their feelings. So they may hint around about a friend of theirs who's contemplating suicide when they may indeed be the person that's doing that. We look for things like if they seem to be preoccupied with death or the suicide of a friend or a classmate. Very often we have copycat kinds of events that happen after a young person has committed suicide, where other kids will see the outpouring of emotion by everyone in the school, and they figure this is a way for people to care about me and notice me as well. If they're angry at someone else, expressions like they'll be sorry. If I was gone, they'd be sorry. That'd show them. things like that. If they're tying up loose ends, if they're making sure that they're returning things that they had borrowed, if they're paying back money that they owe, if they're calling people up, just say, I just wanted you to know that I love you and I don't ever want you to forget that. Okay, statements like that as far as tying up loose ends. Suddenly giving away their possessions is a big indicator sometimes with kids. A preoccupation with relieving pain. There are many, many different ones, one of which is very important to notice, and that is if they have a terrible problem going on and all of a sudden they have what appears to be a relief and a lift in their spirits without any visible resolution to that problem, they may have made the final decision to kill themselves. Have you ever been at a job where you were miserable and just couldn't stand it? It was just eating you alive, and you put in your 2 weeks' notice, and once you did that, you noticed that people started treating you nicer, and you actually felt very much better because the decision had been made. You're leaving. You're seeing, I can take 2 more weeks of this because, there's an end in sight now. There wasn't before. So making a decision sometimes will cause a relief in those terrible feelings and a lift in spirits.
Are you asking me? Is that a rhetorical question? Or are you asking me specifically?
Well, it's both.
Okay.
I know you have a much more extensive track record of getting fired than of resigning at the radio stations, but they keep hiring you back. That's a really cool thing. Is you getting fired at a radio station is kind of all that's going to come out of that is an increase in ratings. But
it's
yeah.
I'd like to address that. Years ago, yeah, I think I do hold the record for being fired more often in the shortest amount of time than any other broadcaster. I've been fired at least 4 times in 12 months. And so, yeah. Now, let me tell you about what I've done when I've had these situations that were unbearable. Many years ago, back in the 80s, I had a boss who was just impossible. No matter what I did, I could do exactly what he said, and I would get beat up for it, figuratively. I mean, it was really stressful. It was one of those kind of jobs that you'd say, geez, what a lousy day I had, and what a lousy day I'm going to have, and, for the foreseeable future, it's not going to get any better. So what I did was I started investing in real estate so that I could be financially independent of that job, so I could ultimately ask my boss's boss if I could have a different boss from the one I had. I liked working for the company, but I didn't like working for that guy. So after several months, I thought, you know what, I am now an owner of several apartment buildings, and I went whole hog into it, went way into debt, and it was working. It was actually working, and I was rehabilitating these apartment buildings. And I got the courage to go to my boss's boss, the senior vice president, and say, hey, I really love this company. I'd hate to leave this company, but could I have a different boss? And he said, sure, you can have a different boss. If you can get a different boss to agree, we'd love to keep you. Yeah. Have at it. And I got a different boss, and it was just like a great experience. So that was one way I handled this situation. Another time, I had another miserable boss. I mean, this guy was just almost as bad. The first one was an alcoholic. The second one was just a miserable person. And I was in a meeting with him and my team, my direct reports, and it was late at night, and he wanted. My son had gone in surgery. He was 2 years old. He'd gone into surgery, and he had hip reconstruction. And it was a very serious thing, and I wanted to go see my son. And the boss said, hey, I need you to do charts and reports for the president. And I said, I'll do them. I'm going to go see my son. I'll be back, and I'll stay all night, and I'll get them done. They'll be done by morning. And he gave me a really hard time. And I just said, excuse me. And I left the meeting, and that was the last that they ever saw of me. And I was the first officer of this particular bank to ever quit. The first one. No one had ever done it before. So that's how I reacted to two different situations. But anyway, so and of course I get fired too. So I enjoy I enjoy all sides. But I like being fired the most. I really enjoy being fired.
It's fun, especially if it gives you the opportunity that after they fire you, they ask you to, do you have anything to say? Yeah.
And you know, I've never done what every guy wants to do. I have never peed on the boss's desk, you know. but I think secretly every guy wants to do that.
Yeah, because right when you're doing that, that's when you want to ask, well, do I take it that eligibility for rehire is out of the question? Benny, I wanted to address something very quickly when you were talking about the careful use of language earlier.
Yes. And I was serious about that, Joel.
Yeah,
I was serious.
There are 3 words that I believe that counselors, parents, everyone in a position of authority or in a position of imparting wisdom to others should totally eradicate from their vocabulary. I wish the words didn't exist. And the words are why, should, and ought. Why questions tend, regardless of how you ask them, tend very often to sound accusatory. Should and ought very often makes a person feel stupid. No one enjoys feeling stupid. They may enjoy acting stupid, but they don't enjoy feeling stupid. So the careful use of language, here's an example. I would not say to a caller, or let's say I was dealing with an abuse survivor. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say, well, why didn't you say something sooner? Okay, what I would say is, what was going on that caused you to be hesitant to say anything? Okay, or what was going on that kept you from talking? Okay, now that very subtle difference in language is actually a huge difference in language, because what it's doing is it's you're putting it out there that they had justifiable reasons in not talking for a while. Okay, but when you say, why didn't you say something sooner, it makes them sound like they were making bad choices by being quiet, or that somehow they were complicit in what's going on. Should and ought, if I tell you, what you should do this, and you know what you ought to do, Vinny? You ought to do this. I'm giving you advice, and the big problem with advice is twofold, especially for counselors. If a counselor gives advice and it works, the person's going to be dependent upon them forever. They're going to be an albatross around their neck. And if the advice doesn't work, they're going to get fired. Either way, the responsibility or the blame falls on the counselor rather than on the individual. So I believe in helping people, empowering them to make their own decisions, guiding them, being what we call a guide on the side rather than...
I'm going to try playing a little clip here. I'd like you to hear this, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. It's about 21, 22 seconds.
Okay, Vincent. I understand that all of us are scheduled to be off campus for a field trip. Good job. I like field trips. Since you made the arrangements, please instruct our class where and when to meet for the field trip.
Okay, so we've got a field trip. Field trip coming up Monday at City Hall, Springfield, Missouri. And I just wanted to share this with you. We'd like you to bring 3 of your closest friends. We're going to say hello to City Hall. We're going to introduce ourselves to City Council. And we are going to introduce ourselves to Greg Burris. He's the guy that we produced the bumper stickers for that say, Fire Greg Burris, 417-864-1001. Because he's putting fluoride in the water. We want fluoride out of the water. We want them to stop poisoning us. Why? Why are we taking this on as an issue? Because we believe at USAPrepares.com, we believe that if we are being poisoned and we are being dumbed down and we're having our IQs lowered and our children's IQs lowered, we are being coerced into behaving the way the government wants us to behave. We're not interested in becoming conditioned. Okay, we want to be free thinkers and we want to be productive members of society and we want to be the best we can be. We are not willing to accept anything less than that. So we do not want to be poisoned by fluoride. And we're going to City Hall. And we've contacted all the radio stations, all the television stations. They probably won't cover it, but I guess we'll have a large turnout of usaprepares.com and Get Prepared Expo students, instructors, teachers. I'll be there. So that's Monday, 6:30, City Hall, Springfield, Missouri. If you'd like to join us, you're certainly welcome to. Now, why am I mentioning this on a national broadcast? Because, class, you can do exactly the same thing that we do in your town. We're just trying to lead by example. It's as simple as that. We want fluoride out of the water, and as soon as we win that one, we want our taxes reduced by 50%. We consider that just a good start. We want our freedoms and our liberties back, and the line in the sand has been drawn. So if you wonder who was involved in saying, that's it, well, we said it. We said, that's it. And so this is the way we are going to respond to the government overreach, the trifecta of government overreach was Benghazi. The scandal, okay? The IRS and the Department of Justice. What they're doing to us, targeting us, that's it. Homeland Security, buying all these bullets, that's it. Okay, Joel Johnson's with us, and so we've been talking about what are the signs. What are the signs that young people exhibit that show us that they are in crisis mode, that they might be thinking the unthinkable, suicide. And what do we need to do? So, Joel, you mentioned you'd like to take out of the vocabulary why, should, and ought. And as you were saying that, it occurred to me very, very clearly that we at usaprepares.com don't take direction very well. And I say that, none of us is really capable of holding down a job. And what I really mean by that, it's not that we couldn't do a job. We would all do it very, very, very well. It's just that we don't take people telling us what to do very well because, we want to be part of that decision and we want to do a really outstanding job. We are committed to and passionate about doing a good job. We just don't like being told what to do. And that's where I hear that should and ought that you were talking about. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. There are very few feelings that are more painful than feeling stupid. And so to enter into an advice-giving role with someone very often is giving them the answers. You're handing them fish rather than teaching them how to fish. So not only is it insulting to them emotionally, but it can be disempowering as well. Kids don't talk to begin with for a variety of different reasons. It may be shame, that they're feeling threatened, that they feel that they're going to get into trouble, a fear of being locked up. It could be that they're just weary and mistrust to begin with. It could be because they feel that they're misunderstood, that they're being coerced. It may be to protect their abuser. It may be because they're traumatized. It may be because we're just ignorant of their developmental level or we're using language that they don't understand. It could
Joel,
be
hold that
because
thought.
of lack of support.
Joel, hold that thought. We'll be right back. No shortage of breaks here. usaprepares.com on Genesis Communications Network. We'll be right back. So the question is, how does this relate to usaprepares.com? Well, frankly, you need to pay attention to everything around you. You need to pay attention to what your children are saying, what your parents are saying. And you need to, in my opinion, pay attention to what drugs legally and illegally your family may be consuming. And according to what I'm seeing, Joel Johnson of the National Crisis Intervention Training Institute, NCITI.org. By the way, the link is on the website, page 1, at the bottom of the page where all the instructors are. Class, if you'd like to click on it and go see Joel's website, where he has lots of resources, free downloads of all kinds of documents that may help you. Joel, it looks like from the 1950s to the 1990s, suicides in young adults has nearly tripled. Has it gone up since then, since the 90s?
Yes, actually the numbers keep climbing, depending on which study you're looking at. But again, statistically, I think we're looking at a lack of reliability there because of what in law enforcement we call the dark figure of crime, meaning the unaccountable ones or the ones that are misdiagnosed. An example is the one I gave earlier in the broadcast of a situation that would look like a suicide, but it was actually a sacrificial act of heroism. And what that would be tantamount to would be felony murder, because if the people that were extorting the young man, and in doing so they were committing a felony, caused him to take his own life and coerced him into doing that, then that was a death that resulted during the commission of a felony. So, in my opinion, it should have been classified as felony murder rather than suicide. So, yeah, okay. The numbers are off.
Okay, and Joel, when you talked with some of these young people, do you ever hear from them later on where they may say, "I just called to say thank you because I was right on the edge of doing the unthinkable, and I just want to say thank you"? Has that ever happened?
Oh, absolutely, many times. In fact, mentioning that, I'll pull up something while I'm addressing that. We received many letters throughout the years from kids who were expressing their gratitude, and almost without exception, those kids at the time that we were talking to them, they weren't too happy about what we were doing to intervene. I'm trying to get to a letter right now. Here, it's from a young lady. Now, this was a number of years ago. This is a young lady named, we'll call her Miranda. She was an 18-year-old caller who had been a victim of ritualistic repeated rape 3 times a week since she was about 11 or 12 years old, and she was cutting herself with glass when she first called us up and was talking about the abuse. We intervened during a near fatal suicide attempt. In fact, when the EMS came busting through her door, she had already gone into respiratory arrest. Later on, she wrote a letter, and in that she said, "I never cut myself with glass before. I've done other things, but nothing that hurt that much. I just thought the hurt on the inside would stop if there was something else to think about. The hurt in the inside is still there, though. It didn't make a difference. It gets hard, but you were there, just like you said you would be. Thank you." Now, at the time that we first heard from her, whenever we intervened and saved her life, that child was really, really angry. And we got this letter a while back where she was basically writing to thank us for her life. And so that's a very common occurrence. Very common occurrence.
Have you taken calls from a specific location, or do these calls come in from all over the country?
Well, at that time, we were taking calls in from all over the country. The hotline number at that point, and I was with the National Youth Crisis Hotline from its inception in 1988 until 1996. And so it was right at about 9 years. The hotline was very often broadcast on a number of different national television programs, so we would take calls from all over the country, and we nationally advertised it. Now, that hotline has long ago gone defunct. The organization disbanded a couple of years after I left them. I was director of their Department of Crimes Against Children and served as such for 11 years after leaving Norman Police Department, where I was a detective working crimes against children, and now I'm living back in in Norman. Most of the calls that we get now, Vinny, requesting services and assistance are from adults here at National Crisis Intervention Training Institute, but we're just in the process of incorporating as a nonprofit, and we would love to be able to reach out more to youth as well, and we have several programs specifically designed to do that in the making. I encourage your callers to go to the website, and also keep in mind that we have a number of different topics available to come into communities to speak and to train professional groups, and I would love to visit with anyone that would like us to have come in and visit with their organization, group, agency, etc. And those topics are available on one of the pages of my outline or my hotline as well. I'm sorry, my website.
Okay, so you're saying if there's a group that would like to hear more about what we're talking about during these 2 hours right here on Genesis Communications Network, if they'd like to hear more, ask you one-on-one questions and help people who are considering the unthinkable, you are available at NCITI, National Crisis Intervention Training Institute.org, and you can find out how to contact Joel Johnson right there. Joel, I'd like to put out a call to our class. For those of you who are thinking of coming to the Get Prepared Expo, Joel Johnson is going to be doing his seminar on way out of the box thinking MacGyver 101. That's July 20 and 21 here in Lebanon, Missouri, at the Get Prepared Expo. But if you think that it makes sense for Joel to talk about crisis intervention and the signs of suicide and what you might want to pay attention to in those surrounding you, your family, your friends, your neighbors, and if you want to pass the word on, if you think that would be a seminar that you'd like to participate in at the Get Prepared Expo, send me an email, please. Vincent at usaprepares.com. Vincent at usaprepares.com. And what we'll do is, if there's interest, we'll ask Joel to make that happen. Okay? So Vincent at USA.
More than honored to do that, Vinny.
Well, Joel, I appreciate that, Joel. I really do. And I know, Joel, we have put together broadcasts in a matter of just a couple minutes. You and I, when an event like the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre happened, I was on my way into the studio at KWTO in the afternoon, and we talked about it, and we said, okay, we're going to be on in a few minutes. Let's talk about why this happened, and my thoughts, your thoughts, and we put all the news together while I was driving on from the farm out to KWTO. I don't always broadcast from KWTO, but that day I was. And so those are the kinds of things that you and I talk about on the air, and you have a lot of experience in that. And, we talked about the Hegelian dialectic component of it, and the copycats and so forth. And Joel, you had mentioned something that I wanted to ask you about early on in the broadcast. You mentioned parents, and you mentioned parents that commit suicide. Now, the young people that I was talking about on hour number one, those younger than 10-year-old, 2 children, a boy and a girl, their father, I said he jumped off the bridge, and he survived, and he was hospitalized, and a couple months later he's back at work and in his normal routine, and then he decided that he would hang himself in the basement, and his wife found him in the basement swinging from a rope. Those children are scarred. I know those 2 children. I know them, and they have never talked about it. As long as I've known them, they've never talked about it. Joel, what is going through their mind with their father? Their mother had died. Their birth mother had died. Their father, a couple years later, meets another woman who has a family, and her husband died. So they get together, they get married, they combine the families, their husband and wife, and now there are 3 children in the family, and the husband commits suicide. So now the children are scarred. What are they thinking, Joel? What is going through their mind early on And then what are they thinking 20 years later today?
Well, one of the biggest threats is their feeling that it was about them, that they were responsible, that if they had perhaps been better kids, or if they had done something differently, or if they had done something to where Dad would love them more, that Dad wouldn't have taken suicide as a route out of the situation. So the feeling that concerns me the most that they're very likely feeling is the feeling of being responsible for what occurred. And we know that they're not, but the child doesn't know that. And they may grow up with those feelings just embedded in them for the rest of their life. So the guilt, the shame and embarrassment, all of those things. And tragically, what we know is that families in that type of situation, children whose parents have died as a result of suicide, are at greater risk of themselves committing suicide or engaging in other very debilitating, dangerous escape types of behavior, such as substance abuse, etc. So those things need to be addressed with those kids preventatively.
And I can tell you those kids did have a tough row to hoe. I'm sure they were thinking a lot when they were in school about, gee, you know, what my dad did compared to, gee, your dad didn't do that. And I think you're right on the money, Joel. Joel Johnson, we'll be right back. We're talking about suicide. Class, just a reminder, we've got a meetup on Monday, right after the weekend, Monday, Springfield, Missouri, usaprepares.com. We meet City Hall. We want fluoride out of the water. We're going to start with that, and then it's on to taxes, and we're trying to set the example for the rest of the United States. I'll be there, and a lot of our instructors will be there. That's this Monday, 6:30, Springfield City Hall, downtown Springfield, Missouri. And Joel Johnson's with us of the National Crisis Intervention Training Institute.org, NCITI.org. Joel, I receive a lot of calls. And I take the calls. And if I'm on a call, I'll call back if someone calls, when someone calls. And I received a call from someone that I really like. And he said his father was considering and wanted to pursue doctor-assisted suicide because he was in so much pain, physical pain. And I said, whoa. We've got Dr. Shealy on board, Dr. Norman Shealy. We've got Dr. Joel Wallach. The physical pain, maybe we can fix that. Maybe we can do something about it. Let's pursue other alternatives first, the easy ones. Let's do that first, because the suicide's irreversible. And this person had just decided that's what he was going to do, and he told his son that he was going to commit suicide, and pretty much that was the way it was going to go. So, Joel, it's not something that we've just read about. This has touched USA Prepares, me, you. We've seen it. It's for real. And I don't think it's getting any better. And your institute is one way of helping prevent some of these suicides, right? Yes.
And we're just, it's a group of individuals that I work with down through the years. We've been doing the work for a long, long time. We are not incorporated as a nonprofit yet. We're working on that. We're not funded, so everything that everyone does is in a voluntary capacity, and we're now venturing out offering services that are going to be quite expensive to extend to people, but we are just trusting that the funding will be there because the need certainly is. And we're excited about getting this thing formalized after so many years. But if you look at my website, there's such a broad encompassing thread of services there available to youth and adults, to families, to professionals, etc. And one of the key levels of bringing money in, we hope, will be in the provision of training to professional organizations, etc. But there's already a lot available there. I've put a few of the PowerPoint presentations on my free documents page that folks can go in and take a look at those, as well as a number of other documents that they may be needing in requesting services, as well as informational types of things. So just hope they'll explore around. There's a lot on that website.
Joel, when you talk with people on the air on the telephone who are distraught, is it a cornerstone of your organization to always tell the truth and not misrepresent, to just get them past some point where you say, okay, he put the gun down? I mean, let me just say point blank. Is it customary to not tell the truth? Or is that something that you absolutely never do? You always tell the truth?
Oh, no, it's a fatal mistake to lie to someone on the telephone, because by violating that trust, you're going to lose the ability to communicate anything else to them. For example, if someone's talking to me about abuse that's going on with a child, I'm very careful to let them know that I am a mandatory reporter, that I'm not going to say something that, and they'll usually start it out with, if I tell you something in confidence, will you promise me it won't go past you? And so it's extremely important to let them know that I'll only speak to people that are going to be involved in solving the problem, and that I am legally and ethically required to speak to. That if they are concerned about...
Joel, we're out of time.
Okay.
Joel Johnson, we are out of time. NCITI.org. Joel Johnson, the real MacGyver. I'm Vin Finelli. This is USAPrepares.com. We were talking about suicide today. You might want to share this the podcast, with your friends and family. Above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you. Thanks, Joel Johnson.